Hi everybody, it's Stephanie. You may have seen all of those amazing realistic cakes on the internet lately. Well, I want to take that same idea of a realistic cake, but give it a video game theme. So today I am making a stack of Xbox games out of cake. Let's get started. When you make a realistic cake, it's always going to be beneficial to have a real-life model. Luckily enough, I already have a bunch of Xbox games and I just bought Elden Ring, so I'll put that one right on the top. To begin, we're going to need a template. Simply trace around the game onto a piece of parchment paper and cut. And voila, a perfect template. To prepare the cakes, use the template to cut the cake into the shape of the games. Try to go just a tad smaller than the template to account for the ganache and the modeling chocolate. More on that in a bit. I'm running my knife horizontally through the cake, so now I have two pieces of cake. To stack the cakes, it's basically one on top of the other with a thick layer of buttercream in between, just like this. I'm covering this cake in a first layer of chocolate ganache, and after a few swipes along the edges and top with my icing scraper, I then have the rough shape that I'm going for. And after it sets up, I then go back with another layer of ganache to achieve even sharper sides and edges. My modeling chocolate is already colored a beautiful Xbox green, and I'm rolling it out into a sheet, and then I unroll the modeling chocolate over the cake. A trick to sharp corners is to take two fondant smoothers, push them up against the corners of the cake, and then you can use scissors or an X-Acto knife to cut off all that extra modeling chocolate. That's looking pretty good now, so let's work on the game box detailing. I thought about making a mold to create the detailing on the sides, but why not just stack up the actual games and use those as a guide? So that's what I'm doing. Place a ruler on top of each game and etch a line. Continue all the way around the cake. There, that was pretty easy. There's also a thinner line in between each of those lines, so I am lightly pressing my ruler into the cake to create these thinner lines. The games also have an indentation where you open the box, so I first embossed the cake with a perfectly cut piece of cardstock, but that wasn't quite good enough, so I switched to a modeling tool that just happened to be the perfect size, and I worked on it a bit more to push that modeling chocolate inwards to get it pretty close to the actual game. To make this more realistic, I want to make one more game on the top that sits slightly askew. So I'm rolling out one more sheet of beautiful Xbox green modeling chocolate, and using my trusty template, I'm cutting out the shape. A quick comparison to the real game will ensure I have the right thickness. Another trick to making cakes look more realistic is edible frosting sheets. So every time I post this, someone always tells me that I am eating paper. And while it does look like paper, it's actually just frosting that is pressed into an acetate sheet. And then you can load this into an edible image printer and print out any image that you like. And if you guys would like to know what printer I use, I will put the link in the description box. These need to be cut out and attached to the cake. Water works great to attach images, but I chose to use shortening instead because the smallest strip of water onto the front of the image will sadly ruin it. Let's move on to the edible plastic covers. This is a recipe that I got from How to Cake That. You are going to need 3 packets of gelatin and then 9 tablespoons of water. Mix these together on low until the gelatin dissolves. Once it has dissolved, you can see white foam that has collected on the top. Scrape that off and then begin pouring the clear mixture onto a mat. I then let that sit out overnight. I made 2 batches, and here's what they look like the next day. I like how clear they are, but they just aren't flexible enough. Let's try making another batch the same exact way, but at the end, this time I'm going to mix in some vegetable glycerin. And it's the same process of pouring it into a sheet and letting it sit out overnight. Here it is the next day. I actually made a few batches, and when I peel it off, I can definitely tell it's more flexible. Also, next time I'd like to try adding flavoring to it because I'm not crazy about the taste. And I don't think I would serve it to guests as is. This recipe is definitely cool and something I want to experiment with more so I can get it right. Okay, I got a new glaze that I'm excited to try out. It's made by Portoleo Paints, so I'm brushing this over the cake to create a shiny surface to imitate the game boxes. And lastly, I'm adding my gelatin plastic covers. The plastic was definitely hard to stick onto the cake. I found that pushing the edge of the plastic into the side of the cake and then laying it on the top somewhat worked. I also added more glaze to help it stick. And then each game got a strip of edible plastic on the side. And again, these were also hard to stick on. My cake is finished, so let's compare the cake to the real gains. I think it's pretty easy to tell which one is the cake when they are right next to each other. But when the cake is by itself, it's a little bit harder. I did trick my daughter, so I was able to fool at least one person. This reminds me of that show called Is It Real or Is It Cake? Have you guys seen that show yet? Let me know in the comments. I have made one other realistic cake, and that was a steak dinner cake. That one turned out pretty cute, so go check that video out as well. And if you guys have any ideas for me, please let me know in the comment section. All right, I'll see you guys later.